Welcome back to Around the Shoe on the Bill and Doug Show. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis joined every week by two outstanding media members, two vets today, two of the best from the Ohio State beat. We have Dave Biddle from Bucknuts and 247 Sports. Dave Biddle, thanks for coming back, man.
Oh, my pleasure. It's always fun, Doug.
Dave's the best. Cam Teague Robinson, also the best from The Athletic. Cam, thanks as always for taking time, man.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me as always.
Are you good, Cam, if we do like 15 minutes on Deshaun Watson, or would you rather just stick to Buckeyes?
Actually, guys, I just got a phone call. I gotta go. I gotta hop on the call.
We're going to stick to Ohio State football topics. The season is right around the corner. There's so many great outlets covering Ohio State. There's so many great people covering Ohio State. We're looking forward to another season. Tremendous audience, tremendous, huge, involved fan base. And last week, we kind of focused, Landis, on offense, kind of thinking about position groups and going through stuff a little bit. So we're going to do defense a little bit more. We're going to talk about captains a little bit. You good doing defense, Landis?
We might as well do both sides of the ball. Yeah, makes sense.
Okay. All right. So let's jump in then with Dave Biddle answering the first question. We're going to start with the secondary. Dave Biddle, what word or phrase would you use to describe your expectations for Ohio State's secondary?
I went with somewhat surprisingly bullish because entering spring, when I looked at the roster, I was like, I like the talent with certain guys, obviously Devin Sanchez, Jermaine Matthews, Jalen McClain. I thought they did a good job in the portal, but two guys really changed the depth here in a good way for Ohio State, and that's Jay Timmons, who I thought would play as a freshman. I didn't think he'd be challenging for a starting role. And then Dominic Kelly. I thought Dominic Kelly might be more of a rotational, like depth piece this year when he transferred in from Georgia, and then he played really well in the spring. He's carried that over. Those two guys have really helped the depth there. And I'll also throw like Simeon Caldwell in there, a true freshman safety. I mean, he's not challenging for a starting role, but I like the depth there. They did a good job in the portal bringing guys in, but you're losing Caleb Downs and IGB, who had a really good year last year, turned himself into a second-round pick. So I was concerned about BIA entering spring, but I'm surprisingly bullish on them entering the season.
Yeah, it's so interesting to bring up IGB and discussing BIA because, again, there are just these guys, Dave, that I always think about. You appreciate them when they're here, and then when they leave, sometimes you appreciate them even more. I'm curious how many IGB conversations we might have during the course of the year, whether we have none, because it's like, I don't know, like they're fine. Or whether they're like, oh man, they could use a little juice. They could use a physical corner. Like I'm curious about if we'll ever feel like they're missing David Snigbenosin, who I think is having good camps, right? Where good camps for IGB? Is that good NFL reports? Didn't I see that? No. Yes? No? I saw a clip. Sure. I saw one clip at one point. One clip is enough for me. Cam Teague, how would you describe what's going on with the OSU secondary?
Yeah, probably similar to Dave. I went with unreasonably high. I mean, I think they might be one of the best secondaries in college football, and I don't know that I would have thought that maybe in November of last year. I wouldn't thought that they could lose IGB, they can lose Caleb, and think they're going to be really really good again. I'm really really high on Devin Sanchez. Like I think he could have like an All-American type year. I've always been really high on Jalen McClain. I also didn't think that in January, if you had told me, Terry Moore's kind of fallen out of the rotation, that I'd be like, I still really like this secondary. And I still do. I think Jay Timmons is obviously a new kind of addition since camp, but I think his versatility helps. And then you have depth at the corner, Jermaine Matthews, Dominic Kelly. I like those two. And then the ability to kind of roll guys where they have Earl Little or Terry Moore or Leroy Roker. I think they're deep. They're talented. I think they're long. I don't know what they're going to do with Dominic Kelly, but in my mind, the idea of Devin Sanchez and Dominic Kelly on opposite sides of the field in the red zone, how do you really throw the ball against two guys that long? So I'm really high on this group. Probably the highest I am on any of the defensive position.
Yeah. Landis, I think a lot of people have been high, just as you've been looking at the secondary over the course of the offseason, do you feel like that's a consensus opinion, Cam, that people are yeah? Or do you feel is this a little bit of a surprise to you how good you feel about this group as we sit here right now with the season coming?
I think I'm a little bit surprised just because of how camp work shook out. Like when Terry wasn't in the slot, I was kind of like, or when Earl wasn't in the slot and Terry wasn't up high, I was kind of just like, what are we doing here? Like, what is this really going to look like? And then you start hearing more about Jay, and then you start seeing the way Jermaine and Devin and Dominic Kelly are playing. Like, I think as those first couple of days of camp went on, I was like, oh, okay, I could see this. Like, I think this could really work out.
Okay. Landis, where are you?
Yeah, similar spot. I think I said strength of the defense. I really do think it's the position group I think going into the season that I sort of feel most comfortable with. Now I don't know that I feel particularly bad about any of them, and we'll talk more about some of the others. But the weird thing that has happened is like I felt good about them coming into camp, like coming off of spring, coming into camp. Like this position group feels like it has some substance to it. And now with the way things have sort of like played out at safety, like the one way you could look at it is like I don't know about like we thought Terry Moore was going to start. What's up? And it's like, one of your backup safeties is a guy who was the best safety in the ACC 2 years ago, right? Like, so like it's a glass half full view on it, I suppose. But the depth here is like kind of ridiculous because like we haven't said Cam Calhoun's name, right? And I don't know how much he's going to play, but if he's the fourth corner, it's like that, he was really good at Utah 2 years ago, right? He's been, I know he's on his fourth program in 4 years, and that's kind of a weird thing. And maybe you can't bank on production, but it's not like he hasn't played. He's old. He's an old guy who's played and at least at one time played at a pretty high level. So I just don't know that there's going to be like much drop off sort of like from starter to backup with this group. And then, you know, the IGB thing I think is interesting. I'm a little, well, I guess I would say like I was curious about like that mindset in the room, sort of like who has it, who's going to set the tone. Then we talked to Devin Sanchez and he's like rattling off all the names of all the receivers that he's going to face this year. And I was like, oh, I guess he's going to set the tone. Now he's got to go out and back it up on the field, obviously, but I just think they're in a good spot. I'm interested to see what happens at the other corner spot with Jermaine Matthews and Dominic Kelly, and if there's any like push and pull there throughout the season. But even if there is, I'm not sure that that's a bad thing. So, you know, there's not really a spot that I'm like concerned about with the secondary. You know, if you're going to play a true freshman a lot, that's a heck of a spot to put Jay Timmons in. But he's also one of the best players in the high school class. So if anybody could do it, I would assume it's him. So, you know, will they have anybody who's quite as good, quite as impactful as Caleb Downs? Probably not. But if you sort of like average out the impact of the secondary last year compared to this year, I think there's a world where this one could be a little better.
Wow. Which again, like when you're talking about that would be high praise. I don't think it's unrealistic though. Just guys, as we talk about Devin Sanchez, you know, I wrote a thing a couple weeks ago at BillAndDougShow.com talking about some of the great practice matchups in recent Ohio State history. And I said, I thought maybe this season, the practice matchup between Devin Sanchez and Jeremiah Smith had a chance to be the best practice matchup since Taylor Decker and Joey Bosa more than a decade ago. Are we assuming too much with Devin Sanchez for a guy who played 300 snaps last year, had reasonable freshman struggles at times? He's talked about those plenty, but is a 5-star recruit, is positioned to be the number one corner. I do feel like that we are kind of assuming he's going to be great. Is there any reason not to do that? Or is it like, what are you talking about? Yeah, like this guy's got it all.
Yeah, I mean, could we, the collective media, be wrong about something? Sure. Yes. I don't know. Like, I thought he played well at the end of the year against Miami, and I thought you saw him getting better over the course of the season. I think it's a really tough position to play, especially in some of the spots where he was in. Like it wasn't like he had the opportunity to hide necessarily. It's like he was on the field when it was a passing down. Like he was on the field when the ball was going to be in the air. And a lot of times teams kind of attacked him, right? Because he was the new guy, he was the young guy. And the Illinois game comes to mind, right? As a game where Illinois found some success, particularly on one drive, kind of throwing against Devin Sanchez. But, you know, had he not shown that improvement, I don't think we'd be where we are right now, sort of in the consensus on him. But because he did have to play in a pretty big spot against Miami and seemed to play well, I don't know that it's really unfounded.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm with Bill here. For me, my praise of Devin started like with the Miami game, and I was like, all right, like this kid's got it. And then like you look at the physical makeup of Devin Sanchez, like he's like physically like just different than a lot of corners, especially his age. And then you saw him in the spring game. I thought he was really good in the spring game. And then I was just like, all right, yeah, like it's I remember leaving the spring game and thinking like this kid could be an All-American. Like I wish I could just be like a bird sitting on a tree over the woody watching Jeremiah and Devin every single day. Like if they would let us just watch that their reps every day and not write about it, I'd be fine with it. Like I would just be like just a football fan and we would want to watch that. So yeah, I like Bill said, could we be wrong? Yes, but like I feel like everything you've seen since the Cotton Bowl makes you think that like, hey, like Devin's got it. It's just a matter of can he take it to the field this year when there's more expectations on him.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot, guys, of Jeff Okudah 8 years ago, entering the 2018 season. Jeff, big time prospect, number 1 corner in the country, out of Texas, no less. Played a lot as a true freshman, but was picked on at times. And then as a sophomore, really came of age as a junior. But by the end of his sophomore year, like Jeff Okudah was a dude. He played really well in the Rose Bowl that year. But yeah, Doug, I think we are assuming. I mean, we have to see it first because I think the fact that Devin Sanchez he's a physical specimen, like Cam said. He played a ton of snaps last year for a freshman. I think we're all assuming he's going to take that big leap. But we need to see it first. I'm assuming he will. I'm definitely buying Devin Sanchez stock, but we do need to see it first.
Yeah, I'm not questioning him. I'm questioning us. Right? It's just like, because like sometimes it's like, how are like, you get to the Woody and it's like you start having conversation, everyone's talking to others like Devin Sanchez is pretty good. Yeah, no, I think Devin. And then by it's like, I think we're probably right. And this is like how it works at Ohio State. It's like, oh, they get a 5-star recruit. He plays some as a freshman and then he pops when it's got like he gets a chance to start. I think we're probably right. I'm going to say I'm veteran curious. Because I don't doubt it, but I'm curious about how good Jermaine Matthews and Earl Little will be. Because Jermaine has been an excellent Buckeye for many years. We all know he didn't play as well the second half of last season as he wanted to. Earl Little began his career at Alabama, had a really good year at Florida State last year, was a big transfer addition, but he hasn't done it here, and he, wasn't an All-American at Alabama before he went to Florida State. Like he's a big time dude, but also just like we're sure he's going to be some kind of version of a Caleb Downs veteran replacement. If they both play as well as they've ever played, if they play at peak, they're vets and they've got this, then I think with McClain and Sanchez and Dominic Kelly and all the guys you've mentioned, like it's through the roof. But I'm a little curious what if they're solid, but it really is about McClain and Sanchez and Dominic Kelly and some of the young Jay Timmons, some of the younger guys doing their things. Would they be the guys who are like, oh, they threw at Jermaine, or like, oh, or a little got caught in between there? I just think like they might be the guys who determine if this is a very good secondary or sort of like Cam, what you said, maybe the best secondary in the country. And so I don't doubt it. But also, I kind of want to see it a little bit from both of them, even though they're veterans. Yes? No? Doubting? Am I doubting too much? Am I doubting? Okay.
No, it's healthy. It's healthy. I don't think it's not really skepticism, right?
It's
but
not.
I think yeah. The hive mind gets you nervous. I understand. We're all thinking too much alike.
Yeah. No. But we've been saying all offseason, we think the secondary has a chance to be the strength of the defense. So like maybe I'm just making up things to doubt because they're probably going to ball out. Anyway, let's move on to the linebackers. Cam, we'll start with you. Let's just set last year's linebacker play for the Buckeyes at a 10 out of 10. When you have two guys like Sonny Styles and Arvell Reese who are that special, that smart, that connected, and then you can throw in a guy like Peyton Pierce to be your third linebacker. Like, that's what it looks like. So we're setting, that's a 10. What do you think this year's linebacker play could be? If that's a 10, this could be a 3.2. This could be a 9.9. Like, where is your anticipation, Cam, with this linebacker room this year?
Yeah. It's tough. It's one of the more uncertain positions I have, like, just because and you and I talked after Matt Patricia talked a couple weeks ago, Doug. It's just like you don't really know what this linebacker room looks like. But yeah. I feel really, the thing I feel really, really good about, I feel really, really good about Peyton Pierce. So like if he's going to be your Mike and he's going to be on the field at all times, I'm going to give this linebacker room a 7.4 because I feel really good about Peyton Pierce, and I like the versatility of Allegro and Riley Pettijohn, and people seem high on Alford. I think if Peyton Pierce is as smart as people say he is, I think he can be a very good safety blanket in the middle of the field. And then it allows Patricia to kind of use Pettijohn, use Allegro. I mean, do you want to put Quay as the defensive end or an outside linebacker? Like, I think you have the ability for Matt Patricia to kind of get creative with the rest of those guys. There's no way in any world that we're going to get Sonny and Arvell production out of this group. It's just, I don't want to say impossible, but highly unlikely. But I think if Peyton Pierce is as solid as they say, and he doesn't, like, he could be Cody Simon solid, like just like a guy in the middle who's just there, makes the right plays that come to him, and is the quarterback of the defense there. I think that they'll be a solid group.
That's a good name. That's a good name to throw out there as we try to, we're coming off of Sonny, so then it's okay. Well, like, what's the characterization here? That's a smart name to throw out there, Cam. Landis, what do you think of a number here?
So I am on record predicting both that Peyton Pierce will win Big Ten Linebacker of the Year and that Christian Allegro will lead Ohio State in sacks. So I think I need to be pretty high here.
11? You thinking 11 here? Sonny who?
So I think there's sort of a difference to me between like presence and production, right? Like, I actually do think the linebacker room this year could end up being like quote unquote more productive than last year's. Like I'm just double check. Like Sonny ended up with 82 tackles. Arvell had 69. Arvell had 10 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks. Like in a world where Caden McDonald's not sucking up 60 tackles, I think the linebackers are going to produce more, right? I don't think there's anybody in the room who is as good as Sonny and Arvell, but I think they probably will end up with better counting stats than maybe those guys had last year. So anyway, I'm like an 8.4, I guess. I don't know if that doesn't seem high enough considering some of my predictions, but I do think they're going to be pretty good. I am as bullish, I think, as you can be on Peyton Pierce. I just think he's ready for it. Different physical profile than Sonny and Arvell. I think, he thinks about the game as well as those guys. I think he anticipates as well as those guys did, maybe even a little better perhaps than those guys did. I think he's a sure tackler. I think he might generate some turnovers. We saw him punch that ball out against Miami in the Cotton Bowl. I think we'll see some of that this year. Allegro's going to play a ton. I'm curious to see how much he ends up playing in the box as opposed to just like kind of on the line of scrimmage. But either way, I think he makes an impact. And like it's hard for me to kind of put my finger on exactly what we're going to get out of Riley Pettijohn and TJ Alford, but they're just sort of so explosive that I feel like whatever it is, it's going to be good, right? So and like the fact that they have kind of 4 that seem like they can play, and maybe even more than that if you throw in Garrett Stover and Eli Lee, like it's again like another deep group. So I'm pretty high on them, I guess. Like 8.4, considering what they are losing, I think is about as optimistic as you're going to get.
Yeah, again, like the standard that we're setting here is like the greatest linebacker pairing in college football history. I don't know. Like, I don't know what Sonny and Arvell are going to wind up like when you look in the history books, what they were last year. I'll say 8.1 because I've already worked myself into a frenzy about TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn not playing enough. And I'm like, what are they going to do? I'm on the hashtag too many good players. Like I'm fascinated by how the pieces of this defense might be utilized. Cam, as you and I were talking about, like, can they play this many guys and this sub package and that sub package? But like part of that for me is if Pierce and Allegro are assumed, how do Alford and Pettijohn fit in? And I looked, the number of snaps Arvell played as a third linebacker in 2024, the number of snaps Pierce played as a third linebacker last year. I kind of want more than that. How does it look? How are they going to do it? And so if I'm already preemptively worried about the 4th linebacker for Ohio State not getting enough snaps, then I guess I think they're good. So like I think the depth really matters. I'm curious how they'll be used and platooned potentially. And I think it's a little bit exemplifies what I think is going to happen a lot with this defense, that it's not going to look like it's not the same, but it's maybe close to as good in a very different way. And I think that might be sort of the story of the whole defense this year, and it applies here. So I'll say 8.1. What do you say, Biddle?
I jotted down 8.5. I thought I might be low man on the totem pole here. I guess I'm the highest on the linebackers, barely higher than Bill with an 8.4. I went 8.5. I think the depth here is what raised the grade for me, because with Pierce and Allegro as the presumptive starters, obviously Pierce is going to be a starter. I love the fact that 3 and 4 are Pettijohn and Alford, like you guys are talking about. I mean, those guys, one of those guys or both could have a breakout season this year if they get a chance. I mean, those guys were big-time recruits, especially Pettijohn, one of the top linebacker. I mean, they were both, top 15 linebacker recruits, but Pettijohn was like top 3 linebacker recruit in the nation. I think those guys are going to be studs here eventually. Will it be this year? Probably not, because they're entering the year. They're not even, starters, but the depth is huge because of such a long season. One of those top 2 guys is probably going to get banged up. Hopefully it's nothing serious. So I think that would allow Pettijohn and or Alford to get in there. And then, like you guys alluded to, are they going to major in 3 linebacker sets? No, but I think we might see a little bit more than what we saw last year, maybe a little bit more than what we saw the previous year. So that'll allow, a Pettijohn or an Alford to get on the field a little bit more. And then the versatility, as you guys mentioned, with Allegro can play, he can play defensive end, he can play outside linebacker. Same thing with Pettijohn, very versatile. Whereas Alford, as you guys know, is much like Pierce, more that traditional Mike. I really like that top 4. And as Bill mentioned, you could go even deeper with like Garrett Stover, who was an Iron Buckeye. They only named 4 Iron Buckeyes. I always think like of a team of 105 guys, if you're one of 4 to maybe be Iron Buckeye, that's notable. He'll probably be all over special teams this year, along with Eli Lee, but that's pretty good business when your 5th and 6th linebackers are Stover and Lee. And Sincere Johnson's going to be a dude here eventually, probably not as a freshman. Yeah. But, I love the depth. Maybe I feel like I'm being a little too high on them now since I had the highest grade, but I did go 8.5 for the backers.
I think when that 10 is that 10, I think these numbers are good. And we took into Laurinaitis and we're like, hey, man, we're like around about like an 8 average on you guys. He'd be like, not good enough. Got to be 10.
Yeah, we're not happy with us at all.
Like, okay, I don't know what you're talking about. But I think we all agree, like, losing what they lost, they probably should feel about as good as you can feel while Sonny Styles and Norvell Reese are running around NFL training camps and not coming back for a 5th year of college football. Bill Landis, defensive line. I forced us to think about the Ohio State defensive line for question 3 in 5 categories. The defensive line play for the Buckeyes will be best described as what? Excellent, great, good, okay, or bad? What's your adjective?
I'm a good, I guess. I'll kind of go right in the middle there. My thing with the defensive line is I'm not sure like excellence achievable. I don't know that they have the baseline of talent for excellent to be the outcome here. Happy to be wrong about that if it ends up being that way. But that, like, if there's a thing that I'm sort of like most circumspect about with the defense, it's that. It's exactly how good can the defensive line be? I've said a million times by this point, people are probably tired of hearing me say, like, I do think it has a very high floor. But a high floor can also just mean like you're kind of okay, right? So could they be something better than good? Maybe. Like if Edric Houston like really kind of puts it all together, if James Smith, who's got that 5-star pedigree, has like the best year of his career, if Kenyatta Jackson, picks up some of that production that Caden Curry left out on the table last year, there are a couple of different avenues I think that could get you to something better than good. But I think it's going to be more of a collective kind of deal, like a some of its parts kind of thing. I do think they're going to play a lot of guys, and in doing so, I don't think there'll be much drop off. And I think there's a lot of value in playing a lot of guys and staying fresh and kind of being able to come at offensive lines in waves. But I don't know that they're going to be a defensive line that feels like it's sort of like taking over games at times. And I guess maybe it's been a while. Well, maybe like the 2024 playoff run, I think they kind of had that on the defensive line, but I don't know that they had that much last year outside of the individual effort of Caden McDonald, but they were pretty good up front. I think they'll be like something slightly less than what they were last year, and probably not have a player who has that sort of all-American, are you the best in the country at your position kind of upside that Caden McDonald had.
Okay. I'll also start it good. I think, and I'm almost curious for everybody. It's like, wherever you are, what is the potential elevator of the defensive line? If I'll be at good right now, but I think maybe 2 weeks in, if Kenyatta Jackson is on like a Akeem Mesidor kind of. We talked about like old man strength, like you've been good, and here you are. You're a man, and you're playing against maybe some people who aren't your size, who aren't your age, who don't have your experience, who don't have your football intelligence, and like all the things that. And I might be like, oh no, I don't. What did we want from Kenyatta Jackson? He's out here making people look like fools. That's on the table for me, but also then sometimes I get hesitant about assuming that kind of jump from a fifth-year guy. Like, he's been a very good football player. Is he going to turn himself into a first-round pick this year? It's not impossible. But sometimes I get like, I'm very into that idea of a Kenyatta real emergence. And then sometimes I think like, man, that's hard. Sometimes you're who you are. So I think for me, I'll be a good, and I'm keeping my eye on him on number 2 to see if he can get to great. Dave, where are you?
I am also a good. And for this exercise, I guess that's what, like a 3 out of 5. So if we were doing decimal points, I might go 3.5. But I'll go good. I think they have a better chance of being great than they do. What's 2? Remind me what 2 is. That bad?
Okay.
Or is that just
okay?
Okay. I think they have a better chance of being great than they do just okay. But I think right now it's good. And Ryan Day even kind of alluded to this when we were talking to him the other day, just about this is almost he didn't say it like this, but like this group, and Bill touched on this, they lack star power. Like they have a very high floor. I totally agree with that. How high is the ceiling? Probably not as high as we've seen at Ohio State. Now, as you guys mentioned, if Edric Houston takes a big jump, and if Kenyatta Jackson just takes it to the next level, he was good last year, 6.5, 6.5 sacks, Ty Darvell for the second on the team lead behind Caden Curry. If he can become like first team All Big Ten, or at least second team All Big Ten. Last year he was honorable mention. That'd be huge because Caden Curry's a big loss too. But Caden McDonald is so good. I still can't believe he wasn't a first round pick, even though he was early second round. So I'm going to go with good. I like the depth a lot, strength in numbers. But this goes back to they don't have a lot of star power other than maybe Edric, maybe Kenyatta. We'll see, but we have to see that first. I like the depth. You look at D tackle. I didn't like the depth there at all last year. The guys that were, depth pieces are now a year older. Guys like, Will Smith Jr. might not be a depth piece. He might start. But I think they're going to rotate those top 4 guys a lot with James Smith and John Walker and Edric Houston. Hopefully, if you're a Buckeye fan, Edric's going to be the star of that group. And Will Smith Jr. and Jason Moore's in the mix too. So they feel like he's finally going to be able to contribute a little bit as that number 5 guy. So I think they've got 5 D tackles in there that they can rely on. And then I like the depth at defensive end too, with obviously Kenyatta and Bo are probably going to be the starters, Bo Atkinson, but they're going to rotate a lot of guys. I think for this exercise, we'll have Quay Rousseau as a D end, and then Zion Grady. I think all 4 of those guys are going to play a lot. And then the 5th guy I think is going to be freshman Kari Wilder. So those are 10 guys I think they can rely on, 5 at D end and 5 at tackle. But again, I can't give them great by any means yet. I'll go with good.
Yeah. Okay. I think all that's fair. Cam, where are you?
Yeah, I'm going good like everybody else. I think there's like 2 people that I think can really kind of get this team group to its ceiling, which I agree with everybody. I think their ceiling's probably great. I think one's Edric. I think Edric, he's been banged up. He's been inconsistent. He's had penalty issues at times. Like, if he can really put it together this year and kind of be the star in the middle, like that's going to be a big help. And I think second is Bo. I think Bo Atkinson finally has to get it. Like, I say finally because it's his second year here, but I think everybody kind of expects what you expect. You expect Kenyatta to be a leader there. I mean, I remember 2 springs ago we were thinking like, oh, this guy might be a superstar. Like, and it just hasn't clicked for him. But you expect it to click this year, or at least click more consistently. I think Bo Atkinson has to be a guy, like, especially if you lose Caden Curry and the motor that Caden Curry had. Like, Bo doesn't have to be a superstar, but he has to kind of come in with a similar type of motor that Caden had last year. So I think they're good. I think they can get to great if those guys step up. I do look at the depth as to help. I think it's probably finally they're going to rotate more. Like, I feel like every offseason we're like, the defensive line is going to rotate. The defensive line is going to rotate. And I feel like they have no choice but to rotate this year because they don't have that star power and they have to play a bunch of guys. Like Dave said, could Jason Moore finally jump? You have 5 defensive tackles. You really don't know when all 5 are going to be consistently. So maybe Jason can move in there. I really feel like John Walker can be a dude in the middle. Like, he's just size is just there. I don't know if he's going to take on Bill and practice one day, and then maybe that they'll figure that out. But I do think that they have the guys to be consistent and solid up front. They won't be 2024 Ohio State's defensive line, but can they be consistent enough to stop the run and then maybe get at the passer and maybe be a little more creative on third down? I think they can be pretty solid in the middle there.
It's hard to be excellent at everything, right? So like this, we all said good. Do we think that good could be good enough? Can they get where they want to get? Can they be who they want to be? Can they be at the very heart of the national championship race if the defensive line is good? Is that, or do they need it to be more than that if they really want to win it all?
Probably need it to be a little bit better than good, which is a weird way to say that.
Like
more of a 3.5 than a 3. Close, leaning toward the great, maybe. I just good, just 3 out of 5 stars, I don't think would be good enough unless the secondary linebackers just absolutely ball out.
I think if you expect Kenyatta to be your star on the edge, you need someone else. It can't just be Kenyatta. That's why I'm saying like Edric has to be a guy, Bo has to be a guy. Unless I think the also thing you have to consider is that Matt Patricia could get very like scheme crazy and like dial up some blitzes with like Quay and Allegro and like some twists and stunts inside that like really cause offensive lines issues. Now, I think you have the ability with the more players you have, like you kind of have the ability to mix and match styles and things and get more creative if you really feel like you have 8 or 9 guys that can play. So maybe a factor in that as well. But I don't think it can just be Kenyatta. I think someone else has to come up and like be an all Big Ten guy up front.
Yeah, I think what Patricia decides to do is key here, right? Like I don't know that they had to do a whole lot up front last year just because they had some kind of like singular individual talents. I think Matt Patricia, with Larry Johnson kind of by his side, like they needed to cook some stuff up front, I think, to unlock something for this group. You think about like the Indiana defensive line last year, right? Like they were good, but it's not like they had a bunch of first round picks out there. They had good, old, solid football players who were then put in positions to succeed because of the scheme. And I think that's what this defensive line for Ohio State's going to need this year.
That's another good comparison too. That's a good way to think about it. All right, so we're going to transition from the defensive side of the ball because we covered all the position groups and we wanted to get this guy's name in the headline. But also, it's an interesting discussion. Like we're just riding the waves, right? And so sometimes, there were some big waves early, then the water's calmed a little bit, and now the waves are breaking again for Brock Boyd. So this is not a question for question number 4. Well, I guess there's a question mark at the end of it. I wrote it down. Brock Boyd ... What's the deal? So Ryan Day mentioned him again on Monday, and I have now officially, I am thinking of Brock Boyd as this. Ryan Day was a mentor to Brian Hartline, right? Brian Hartline has said this, I think, as is how Brian Hartline learned to be a head coach, and he went down to South Florida to be that, and he did so after kind of an interesting year where he took on the play calling duties. And was that perfect? No, it wasn't perfect, but he was arguably the best position coach in football during his time at Ohio State. And I do think Ryan Day and Brian Hartline had a very real and important relationship. And as Brian Hartline was leaving, he just it was one of those things where you don't want to have the conversation face to face because it's going to be too emotional. These are 2 football guys. They don't want to cry, right? So he just said, Ryan, there's something on your desk, as he got in his car and drove to Florida. I'm assuming Brian Hartline probably drove to Florida. He had a lot of stuff to take. Maybe got a U-Haul. And Ryan Day went in, and on his desk was a nicely wrapped package. And he opened it up, and inside was Brock Boyd. And it was just Brian Hartline saying, I got this for you. Thanks for everything. It's the 583rd best high school recruit in the country, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to really like it. Take it out, let it run around a little bit, and let me know what you think. And that all this stuff Brian Hartline has done at Ohio State, the way he brought in talent, the way he developed talent, if this is like the final little piece of his legacy, that this underrated kid from Texas comes in and matters as a true freshman, I can't believe it. Because you know what he probably should have done is taken him to South Florida, right? Been like, man, this guy's underrated. I'll steal him for myself. But he left him for Ryan. It's a story of friendship, guys. And that's how I'm thinking of Brock Boyd. So, Dave, the floor is yours. talk about Brock Boyd.
You said, what's the deal? The first thing that came to mind is he's the real deal. That's the first thing I jotted down. He's the real deal. But here's the thing I really want to get into. I think of all these underrated recruits in recent memory, I would submit to the court Brock Boyd might end up being the most underrated recruit that we've seen. And that's not just in retrospect, because when you look at what he did in high school at an absolute powerhouse program, South Lake in Texas, he balled out as a sophomore, junior, and senior. He was one of these guys that didn't like going to recruiting camps, right? So, and that's why he was ranked as the number 100 wide receiver in the country, a 3-star. And again, I always said, if Brian Hartline wants you, you're a recruiting analyst, and you have him as a 3-star, a kid at 3, and Brian Hartline wants that kid at Ohio State, immediately he's a 4-star. That's how it should be. So this was a huge miss by a lot of recruiting analysts, because putting too many eggs in the basket of these 7-on-7 camps where they're not really playing, real football, or just, the underwear Olympics, whatever you want to call them. And not to get off on a tangent here, it might be kind of what we're seeing with Tavian St. Clair, who put on shows at these recruiting camps. And that's why he became a 5-star. It wasn't necessarily what he did at Bell Fountain against, small school Ohio teams. It was really what he did at recruiting camps. It's the opposite for Brock Boyd. So it's kind of funny to me. He was an absolute stud at the very highest level in Texas. And, and it was an absolute steal for Ohio State. And like Ryan Day said, he doesn't know how much he's going to play, but he's definitely going to play. I think there's a clear top 5 in whatever order with what we know who number 1 is, with J.J. Smith, and then Devin McEwen, Brandon Ennis, Chris Henry Jr., and Brock Boyd. Those are the top 5, and I think all 5 of those guys are going to play a lot.
Okay. It's one of those things, like, recruiting, it matters, and stars matter, and it's like a real thing, but like nobody gets it right all the time. But I think your point is a very good one, Dave, is that this is not a second guess on that rating. This is kind of like a first guess that maybe, like, as it was happening when he was tearing up Texas high school football, you maybe kind of knew it. Cam, the floor is yours on Brock Boyd.
Yeah, I put ... because it's kind of, the hype that really kind of left me speechless, really. Like, I just remember, like, I was like in and out during the spring because I was covering women's basketball, and I just remember Brian's first press conference. I think he mentioned Brock, and I was like, "Huh, it's interesting." And then when I came back after like 3 weeks from covering basketball, I just remember I was catching up on stuff and just kept hearing so much about Brock Boyd, and I was like, "What is going on with this kid?" And then like watching him just in the spring game, and I was just like, he might have it. Like he has it pretty good. And then, but you really think about it, back to like signing day, when Pantone was up on the podium and was like, "We feel like we got to steal with Brock Boyd." And maybe that really should have put like everybody's blinders, like open everybody's ears, like, "Oh, hold on, this kid might be something," because he's talented. Like I even look at like some of the social media stuff that like the videos that Ohio State puts out, and like Brock Boyd's in it. Like, I just feel like he has like a demeanor and an attitude that is like, this kid's an Ohio State receiver, no matter what the rankings were. Like, he just has that like vibe of an Ohio State receiver. Like Dave said, I don't know how much he's going to play, but he's definitely going to play. But we also haven't seen it. Like, with the Heartline, like, you really kind of knew your top 3 and you maybe 4th in there. Like, what is this going to look like with 5 receivers with Cortez? Like, you just don't know what that's going to look like. But I find it hard to believe that they're going to go through a season and not play Chris Henry and not play Brock Boyd a ton. So what does that mean for Brandon Ennis? There's no way they don't play Devin McEwen a bunch of. So it's a very deep room, but I'm excited to see Brock. Whether that's like, even if he is like second string against Ball State, I pray for whatever Ball State corners out there, because like that is going to be like some. I was talking to Joey Kaufman from the Dispatch after Dave's press conference Monday, and I was like, I might be most excited to watch the second stringers against Ball State than the first stringers, because I'm like, between the quarterbacks, the receivers, like I'm really excited to see like what these young guys look like. And Brock is at like the top of that list.
That's interesting. Yeah. Stay locked in after halftime, Ohio State fans. Even if the Buckeyes are up by 49-0 at the break, you might have a lot to learn in the second half of the game. Landis, the floor is yours on Brock Boyd.
3 touchdowns at Texas.
Oh,
next question.
And there we have it. Okay.
No, I'm kidding. No. I don't think it'll be quite to that level. Yeah, it all seems very legit to me. I'm glad Dave said it, because I truly have no idea why this kid was ranked where he is. Because that's like one thing. It's like, oh, if he were like hyper productive, but sort of like, didn't have great athletic testing numbers or whatever, that'd be one thing. But that's like kind of not the case, because if you look at like his track numbers, they don't blow you away, but they're not bad either, right? So it's not like he is unathletic and was just kind of cooking against the lower level of high school football. It's like, no, he was getting open and torching defenses at the highest level of Texas high school football. And then he showed up at Ohio State and immediately started making an impact. So like if you do that this early, I just expect you to get on the field in a real way as a true freshman. I think there's some hesitancy because maybe not hesitancy, but you're not 100% there to like wrap your arms around the idea. I think of he or Chris Henry Jr. having monster freshman seasons, because for as good as the receivers here have been, that hasn't happened a ton. Like Jeremiah did it obviously, and Garrett Wilson had a nice season as a true freshman. But I think that's more of a byproduct of circumstance, right? They just haven't needed freshmen to really play. And I think had they needed freshmen to play, we would have seen some more productive freshman seasons. And they sort of do need that this year. So I think Brock and Chris will both be on the field a decent amount kind of right away. Like, I think it's pretty difficult right now to say who's definitely going to be like the second and third leading receiver, just because of like the waves you're talking about, Doug. It's like 1 week you think it's Devin McEwen, next week you think it's Chris Henry, then you think it's Brock Boyd, and maybe next week we'll think it's somebody else. But I think all of that is a window into like this idea that they're all going to play, they're all going to have a role. So I don't know that I'm putting Brock Boyd down for 70 catches and 1,300 receiving yards, but I do think he's going to have a pretty nice freshman season, and I'm not expecting us to be going through the fall thinking like, what was all that Brock Boyd talk about in the offseason? I think that the talk is going to be kind of backed up on the field this year.
It's going to be interesting how Cortez Hankton, as the first-year receivers coach, goes about this. Will it, if it is, and I think, as everybody's been saying, like a rotation, play those 5 guys. Is it a series-to-series rotation? If somebody's has a great connection or is really slicing up a defense that day, do you ride the hot hand a little bit? Do you look for matchups based on opposing corners and safeties? And do they play more man? Do they play more zone? Like, I'm very curious, even within the idea of playing 5 receivers, for instance, what the actual execution of that looks like, which is like back to what you were saying, Cam. It's like, you got to pay attention to this stuff, because they got to figure out if they like 5 guys, well, who's really going to play when it matters against Texas? Who's going to be on the field on 3rd and 6 in the middle of the second quarter when it's 10-10, right? Like, you have to figure that out. And like, maybe there's not an answer, and maybe there's not a wrong answer, but maybe Jeremiah Smith, Devin McEwen, and Brandon Ennis start against Ohio State, against Texas, for instance. Those are your 3 vets starting against the Longhorns. But maybe when it's go time, when the game's tied in the second half, Brock Boyd and Chris Henry Jr. are on the field with Jeremiah Smith. Like, do you guys think you have a handle on how all that might go, or is the point that we can't know yet and they're going to have to figure this out?
I'd go with the latter. I definitely think don't take Jeremiah Smith off the field unless he needs a rest in big games. When the game's on the line, so against Texas, I'm not taking JJ off the field unless he needs a rest.
What if you're in their red zone and you want to put 3 tight ends on the field instead?
Yeah, right, exactly. Actually, let's go 14 personnel. Screw the 13 personnel. Let's get 4 tight ends out there. No, but yeah, I think definitely I'm not taking JJ off the field. I'm leaving Devin McEwen out there a lot, high percentage of plays, and then the other 3 guys I think are kind of, I would mix them in there, and I think. Maybe early in the year, I think Chris Henry Jr. might be 5th on the pecking order as far as snaps, but I think he's going to make splash plays, and he's going to be an absolute stud here next year, taking over for Jeremiah in that role. Big shoes to fill. I think early on, Brock Boyd might get more snaps than him, but all 5 of those guys are going to play. But again, I would go Jeremiah almost 100%, at least close to it, and Devin McEwen out there a lot, and then those other 3 guys, Ennis and Boyd and Henry Jr. I think will kind of be bunched up, and we'll figure that out as we go. That's my take.
I think the thing that'll help.
I kind of agree with that.
Yeah, I think the thing that might help Brock is what Ryan Day said on Monday, that Brock can play any of the positions, right? Like I don't think you wouldn't say that about Chris Henry Jr. just based off body type. You might say that about Devin McEwen and maybe Kyle Parker if he can get healthy and be a part of this, but otherwise, I'm not sure you'd say that about anybody else. So like that versatility, I think will help. Like you can keep defenses off balance that way. You can kind of hunt matchups that way too. So if I had to pick at least early who might have some more snaps, I might lean Brock because of that. If you're talking about just a freshman,
if he's really a burner, like, and if he's really like as hard to guard, especially in like man coverage, as like the Ohio State DBs talk about, and like we've seen him make some we've seen him drop some insane catches on the sideline. We've seen him make some insane catches on the sideline. So like if he can mix that, like it's him and Brandon, like it's going to be interesting because I see Brandon as like a guy who's one, an extremely good blocker, but two, also a guy who's like a very good, like he's very good at finding a hole in his own and like sitting there and kind of making a catch. And then like he's also good at running down the seam and Julian saying just not seeing him and then him jumping up and down, waving his arms up. But I think it allows you to play both of them in different, like Dave said, maybe there's different game plans or there's different situations. Like if Texas is running a bunch of zone and you think Brandon's better at that than Brock, okay. But then if you're going to go against, say, a team is going to run a bunch of man and you think Brock is like, hey, he's a guy who can separate, get the ball, and go, then you might see more Brock Boyd. So that's why I think the Ball State game is so important because you want to see Brock in a game situation in under the lights with the crowd and then see how he handles that and then go from there.
Okay. All right, last one. We're going to talk about captains. Ohio State has named 7 for this season. The defensive side of the ball, it's safety Jalen McClain, linebacker Peyton Pierce, defensive end Kenyatta Jackson. Offensively, it's Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis at receiver, Austin Sareveld on the offensive line, and quarterback Julian Sayin. Dave Biddle, back to you. Just pick a captain and tell us what you find interesting about the fact that he is a captain for the Buckeyes this year.
Real quick, I almost went with Peyton Pierce. He's going to get James Laurinaitis fired. I'm joking. He's not really going to get him fired, but James Laurinaitis let it out there that Peyton Pierce was the leading vote getter, and Ryan Day was asked about that on Monday, and he said, "No, we don't release the actual results of the poll." And I kind of joked. So James is getting fired, and he kind of looked over like, "Yeah, James is in trouble now. He's not going to fire James." But I won't go with Peyton Pierce. I'm going to go with Jeremiah Smith. I think it's so cool that how much this means to him and how much this means to his father, because you think about it, like he's making millions of dollars. He's going to be the first wide receiver off the board. He's probably the best player in the draft next year. He has every reason. Is being a captain at Ohio State really important to him? It's so super important to him. And see like the phone call with his dad, how much that meant to his dad. Really cool stuff. And I think it's just a coach's dream. As you guys know, when your best player is your hardest worker, that just sends a message to the rest of the team. And if Jeremiah's not the hardest worker, he's right up there. All the guys say he's the hardest worker. I'm sure Brandon Ennis would have a case on that too, as well as Garrett Stover and a few others. But I just think a couple of things about Jeremiah. It was just so cool how much that meant to him and his family. And I just think it's so well deserved when you're the best player perhaps in the nation and you're the hardest worker on your team. That just sends a great message. So I'll go with Jeremiah and just the reaction from his dad.
Yeah. Those are very cool videos when they do that. It's nice when it means something to a guy. Cam, what do you think here?
Yeah, I wrote Jeremiah and Peyton Pierce, but since Dave took Jeremiah, I'll go Peyton Pierce. I really kind of about like the whole idea that he's the highest vote getter. I figured there was going to be like you don't have to have a linebacker captain, but if your linebacker is going to be your green dot guy, like you want him to be the kind of leader of that defense. So I figured Peyton would be a captain. I just didn't know how fast he would integrate into that position, and like the idea that he got the most votes is pretty impressive to me. TJ Alford was talking about the other day, like their first scrimmage, like the defense was just not great, and Peyton came in there nearly like on the verge of tears, like so upset about how they played, and to the linebackers and that like telling them that wasn't good enough. Like that's like really good stuff to hear when you have your guy in the middle who's going to be a first starter and already has kind of the ear of a room like that. This defense needs someone like that. When you lose Sonny and Caleb and Caden and Arvell, like you have to have a guy who's respected there, even if they're a first-year starter. So I think that, again, adds to the plenty of reasons I'm so high on Peyton Pierce this year. But it's very interesting that he was the highest vote getter.
Very interesting. Yeah. And again, like, oh no, Sonny's gone. And it's like, this guy is right here. It's like in terms of replacing somebody, what else could you ask for? Landis, who do you have here?
Yeah, I apologize to the listeners for talking about the same guys over and over again, but like it's Jeremiah Smith for me too. We have had a couple of different versions of a conversation of like, what needs to happen still for Jeremiah to like end his career as like a Mount Rushmore player for Ohio State, right? And he's going to have all the receiving records by the time he leaves. He's already a national champion. He has a chance to be a 2-time national champion. He should win the Blitnikoff this year if everything goes right. He could be in the Heisman conversation, right? And then you just pile on top of that the fact that like being named a captain brings him to tears, right? Like that picture that they put out looked like he's got a little tear going down his cheek. It's like, man, That's pulling at the emotional heartstrings a little bit when you're just trying to define a player's legacy. And had he not been named a captain for whatever reason, it's not like I don't think it would have done anything to lessen his legacy at Ohio State, but this certainly enhances it. And to see what it means to him, like Dave said, honestly, like kind of took me back a little bit, because I think it's easy to make assumptions about star players, right? That especially at the receiver position, that there's a little bit more of like a me first thing there. Jeremiah has never, I think, like for 1 second come off that way, but then to see just how much it meant to him to be named a captain, I thought was like a pretty special moment. So that one was definitely one that caught my attention the most.
Yeah, I can remember having a conversations was when I worked in the Philadelphia area before I came to work in Ohio, and the Cleveland Indians back then they were playing an exhibition game in Philadelphia, and it was after Jim Thome had signed with Philadelphia after being in Cleveland for so long, and we were over talking with the GM of Cleveland's GM at the time, and he said exactly kind of what you were saying, Dave. Like when your best player is also your best guy, it's so important to a team. And I do think sometimes all of us, I think sometimes fans, I think sometimes even people within a program, the media, we can kind of think about captains as like the not try hard guys, but there's something about them that like they're busting their butt, and maybe they're not the most talented guy. Maybe they're not the All-American. Maybe they're not the superstar. And that's how we think of captains. But when you have a guy who's this talented staring you right in the face, who also has all the other attributes of like a try hard guy, it's like, oh man, that 6'4" guy who runs a 4.3, he's just a try hard. And it's like, no. He's like sent from space. He's built by the gods to play this position, but he is imbued with like the attitude of somebody who's working his butt off. So like I think we have to be careful to not like assume like you're almost too talented to be a captain. So I do think that matters. Austin Sareveld, I think, has a chance to go down, and we've played this game sometimes of like, think about Ohio State without this guy. And Thayer Munford was a guy that we did that a lot. Like, he was so important on the offensive line. He played multiple positions. He started so many years. And when we look back, Austin Sareveld started sometimes as the offensive line was sort of shuffling around in 2024. He was young, but they needed him, so he played. He actually had a role on a national championship team. Then last year, he becomes a left tackle because who else are they going to play there? And now if he's sliding back to right guard, but this guy's like an All-American quality offensive lineman, and he's a second-year captain. And like just one of those like absolutely foundational guy that you just pluck him out, pretend, and he wasn't the highest rated recruit in the world. He was like pretty high, right? I mean, for an offensive lineman, but like just pretend like it didn't pop for him. It just never really worked. He's the third string talent. Well, then what? Like, where do they go now? And you like Ohio State's offensive line depth, but this guy has solved problems for Ohio State for 3 years now, and a two-time captain. And just like, again, kind of like quiet, goes about his business, but I think will be looked back on, especially as one of those guys like, oh man, thank goodness that guy was a Buckeye, because I'm not sure what Ohio State would have done without Austin Sareveld. So to be a repeat captain, I think is a big deal for a guy like that.
He's interesting. I was going to say,
the more I think about Austin is like,
yeah,
go ahead, Bill.
No, please. You're the guest. By all means, please go.
Yeah. No, I just think the more I think about Austin, the more I think of like Donnie in 2024 and like how he's just solved every issue. And they were like, everybody was hurt and they kept moving him around. And they were like, all right, here, now learn how to play tackle in the middle of the season and go to Penn State and then win a national championship. I just thought like every time the more we talked about Austin this offseason, I was like, whether he moves to right guard or not, like if he had stayed left tackle, there was no way he was going to play on a left tackle regardless. Like I just felt like some point during the year they were like, never mind, just put him at right guard. And I was just like, the more I thought of it, I was like, he just reminds me so much of Donovan and just like the selflessness that comes with that.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that he's the offensive lineman that ends up being a captain, because like when we talk with Luke Montgomery and Carson Hinsman, it's like they're doing stand-up routines. They're just like they're much more like just kind of like out there with their personalities. And Austin Sareveld is basically the opposite. But I actually think like that's just that then gives you a window into like this guy must like work his butt off and just like demand the respect of his teammates if he's not. And like you don't have to be vocal with us necessarily to be vocal around your team, but like the juxtaposition of certain guys in that position group, like I don't think you'd assume that Austin Sareveld is a guy who's the 2-time captain. You would probably say it's more like Carson or Luke, because those guys have no problem kind of speaking their mind, I think publicly or privately.
And can't you just envision Austin Sareveld playing like 10 years at least in the NFL? I think it would take like a catastrophic injury for that not to happen. Like he's going to be, and that'll just enhance his legacy as we look back. Everything you said, Doug, and the story for this year hasn't even been written yet. And technically he could come back next year. I tend to think he'll turn pro. But that'll just add to his legacy when we look back on if he does have a long NFL career, coupled with everything he did at Ohio State, and then being a 2-time captain. Yeah, Saraveld's a dude. And that's probably why Montgomery and Hinsman weren't captains, because they are always doing like stand-up comedy out there where Saraveld's like all about football. Is it better to interview Luke and Carson? Yes, I love interviewing those guys. They're going to give you more than Austin, but it's easy to see why Austin's the leader of that room. Tough dude.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's good for Ohio State in the end that, you know, obviously they brought in so many new guys this year. That was the talk of spring, 51 new players between the portal and the true freshmen. But there was no shortage of captain candidates, right? That this is, it wasn't like you were looking around being like, who's going to lead this team? It's like, no, they got a group of guys who were ready to go. So 7's a lot, but I think it makes sense, and I think it is reflective and indicative of sort of like how this team operates. So that'll do it for this edition of Around the Shoe. We appreciate you guys joining us here every week, where we like to bring in the great voices from the Ohio State beat and talk about the Buckeyes. The season is right around the corner. We'll keep doing this on either Monday or Tuesday every week of the season, and we're excited that, you know, people are still willing to share their time and expertise with us. Dave Biddle, the folks know you, they love you, but if they want to make sure I want to keep up with Dave Biddle, where can they find you?
Bucknuts.com. You can find me on Twitter at Dave Biddle. And then we're going to be doing our regular Morning 5 podcast Monday through Friday. And then we're going to add the post-game show when the games start, which is just about 11 days from now at last check. So we call it What We Learned Live. We go live right after the final gun. So that'll be every Saturday after the Ohio State games. And we'll have the transfer portal is apparently open right now. I think maybe now the Big Ten won't be going after any of these guys based on some news that broke today. But yeah, we'll keep you guys updated with recruiting, transfer portal, wall-to-wall team coverage, everything. And all these, we don't do as many podcasts as Bill and Doug, but we do a lot of podcasts.
You might do more.
Well, you do them in delicious bite-sized chunks. We cram giant helpings of podcasts down people's throats, whether they want it or not. Make sure you guys are checking out what Dave and the Bucknuts crew are doing. They're awesome. Cam, Teague, Robinson, where can the folks find you over at The Athletic?
At theathletic.com. We are ramping up. Obviously now camp's finished and getting ready for the season. Tons of preseason coverage that we've been working on over the last couple months will be rolling out here. And then on Twitter at CJ_Teague. Not on Twitter as much as I used to be, but you know, it's season here. It's football time now. So we'll be back on it. And then just blocking anybody that talks about Deshaun Watson. That'd be the best way to survive Twitter.
I also like that we all call it Twitter still.
Yeah.
When I heard somebody call it X, I'm like, what? Oh, Twitter. Okay, yeah.
It'll always be Twitter to us. Yeah.
Always.
No, do not bring that stuff in Cam's feed. You will get rejected like Dikembe Mutombo. Yeah. He is not taking any of that stuff. Bill Landis, we have a website, and then we also have a new show that we started.
We do have a website, billanddougshow.com. We're doing over-unders on the big Wednesday pod this week, so that'll be fun. And then we started the podcast of Northern Aggression, where you can find me and you and Matt Fortuna talking about the Big Ten, talking about Notre Dame, talking about to use your word, how mid the SEC is. So we have a fun time over there too if you're looking for more of like a regional, national kind of thing in addition to your Ohio State coverage.
Yeah, so that's not going to affect anything we do here. With the Buckeyes, our focus is on Ohio State, but we just tell the SEC to cram it on that other feed. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on your podcast feeds. We'll find you guys, you dedicated, educated Ohio State fans, with all of us interacting, reading, watching, listening. We're so appreciative of you guys giving all of us the chance to just sort of be in your Ohio State football life. And again, thanks so much to Dave and Cam for their time and expertise. That will do it for Dave Biddle, for Cameron Teague Robinson. For Bill Landis, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Around the Shoe on the Bill and Doug Show.